More than 50 years ago, humanity achieved something that once seemed impossible. In 1969, during the historic mission of Apollo 11, astronauts Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin stepped onto the surface of the moon and became the first human beings ever to walk on another world. For millions of people watching around the globe, it felt like the beginning of a new era for humanity. It seemed as if space exploration was about to accelerate rapidly, and that the moon would soon become a regular destination for astronauts and scientists. But something strange happened after those first missions. Humanity stopped going. After the mission of Apollo 17 in 1972, no human being has ever returned to the lunar surface. For more than half a century, the moon remained silent, visited only by robotic spacecraft and distant probes. But now, after 50 years of absence, the moon has suddenly become the center of global attention once again. The United States and China are both preparing ambitious missions to return humans to the lunar surface. But this time, the goal is not simply to plant a flag or prove technological superiority. The goal is something far bigger. The goal is to stay, to build infrastructure, to explore resources, and to establish a long-term human presence beyond Earth. Behind this new race lies a story involving technology, geopolitics, economic interests, and the future of human civilization in space. To understand why this new race is happening today, we need to go back to the first space race. After the end of World War II, the world entered a period of intense geopolitical tension known as the Cold War. Two superpowers dominated the global stage, the United States and the Soviet Union. Their rivalry was not only about military power, but also about demonstrating technological and ideological superiority. Space quickly became one of the most important arenas for this competition. In 1957, the Soviet Union shocked the world by launching Sputnik 1, the first human-made satellite ever placed into orbit around Earth. Suddenly, the space age had begun. Only 4 years later, Soviet cosmonaut Yuri Gagarin became the first human being to travel into space and orbit the Earth. For the United States, these achievements were a serious wake-up call. If the Soviet Union could dominate space technology, it could also gain enormous political influence across the world. Determined not to fall behind, the United States announced one of the most ambitious technological goals ever attempted: sending a human being to the moon before the end of the decade. In 1969, that goal was finally achieved. During the mission of Apollo 11, the world watched as Neil Armstrong stepped onto the lunar surface and spoke the famous words that would echo through history. "That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind." It was one of the greatest achievements in the history of science and engineering. Over the following years, several additional Apollo missions successfully landed astronauts on the moon. In total, 12 humans walked on the lunar surface, collecting rock samples, conducting scientific experiments, and expanding humanity's understanding of our closest celestial neighbor. At the time, many people believed that this was only the beginning of a long era of lunar exploration. Some scientists even imagined that permanent bases could be built on the moon before the end of the 20th century. But despite these expectations, the missions eventually stopped. The main reason was surprisingly simple: cost and politics. The Apollo program was one of the most expensive scientific projects ever undertaken, costing the equivalent of hundreds of billions of dollars in today's money. Once the United States had achieved its primary objective of beating the Soviet Union to the moon, the political motivation that had fueled the program began to disappear. Governments began shifting their attention to other priorities such as satellite technology, robotic exploration of distant planets, and the development of space stations. Missions to Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn captured the imagination of scientists, while the moon gradually faded into the background. For decades, it seemed as if humanity had simply moved on from our closest neighbor in space. But in recent years, the moon has suddenly become important again. One major reason is the rise of new space powers. Countries around the world have begun investing heavily in space technology, including members of the European Space Agency, India, and especially China. Among these nations, China has made some of the most rapid progress in recent decades. Through a series of robotic missions known as the Chang'e program, China has successfully landed spacecraft on the Moon and even returned lunar samples back to Earth. These achievements demonstrated that China had become one of the leading space powers of the 21st century. More importantly, Chinese officials have made it clear that their long-term goal is to send astronauts to the Moon and eventually build a permanent research base there. The United States has also responded to this growing competition by launching a new lunar exploration initiative. Through the Artemis program, the American Space Agency NASA plans to return astronauts to the Moon for the first time in more than 50 years. Unlike the Apollo missions, which were relatively short visits lasting only a few days, the Artemis program aims to establish a sustainable human presence on the lunar surface. The plan involves building new spacecraft, powerful rockets, and even a small space station orbiting the Moon that will serve as a gateway for future missions. Private companies are also playing an increasingly important role in this effort. Companies such as SpaceX are developing next-generation spacecraft capable of carrying large numbers of astronauts and cargo into deep space. The massive rocket known as Starship could eventually make lunar travel far more affordable and frequent than ever before. One of the biggest reasons for this renewed interest in the Moon is the discovery of valuable resources. Scientists now believe that large deposits of frozen water exist in permanently shadowed craters near the Moon's south pole. This discovery is extremely important because water is one of the most valuable resources in space. Not only can it support human life, but it can also be separated into hydrogen and oxygen to create rocket fuel. In other words, the Moon could potentially become a refueling station for future missions deeper into the solar system. Instead of launching every mission directly from Earth, spacecraft could one day stop at lunar bases to refuel before continuing on to destinations such as Mars. Beyond water, the Moon may also contain other valuable materials. One example often discussed by scientists is helium-3, a rare isotope that could potentially be used in future nuclear fusion reactors. Although the technology required to exploit this resource does not yet exist, some experts believe that helium-3 could one day become an extremely valuable energy source. If that happens, the Moon could become one of the most strategically important locations in the entire solar system. Because of these possibilities, the Moon is no longer seen simply as a place for exploration. It is increasingly viewed as a strategic location that could shape the future of space travel, technology, and global influence. Whoever develops the first permanent infrastructure on the Moon could gain enormous advantages in future space missions. For many analysts, this new competition between the United States and China represents the beginning of a second space race. More than 50 years ago, humanity reached the Moon for the first time, but that achievement may have been only the beginning of a much larger story. The next missions to the Moon will not simply repeat what happened in 1969. Instead, they may determine who leads the next era of human exploration beyond Earth. The country that builds the first lasting infrastructure on the Moon could shape the future of space exploration for generations to come. And this time, the race is not just about who gets there first, it is about who stays. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more content like this, make sure to subscribe to the channel and leave a like. It really helps the channel grow and allows us to keep making more videos like this.